Hi again. In John Wesley Bready, This Freedom Whence, England Before and After Wesley, we've reached chapter 12. John Wesley has died, but a nation has been reborn. Starts with two quotes. Professor Frederick Tracy, in a book called Broken Lights, says, "For is not God the principle of coherence in the universe? In him all things consist. And is not religion the supreme synthesis in which all lesser syntheses are brought together into a coherent whole?" I think we might translate that, is not religion necessary to a coherent society? And then Sir C. Grant Robertson in England Under the Hanoverians, in the History of England, Volume 6. Robertson says, at a time when Bishop Butler asserted that Christianity was wearing out of the minds of men, Wesley kept the English people Christian. It is certain that into the moral fiber of the English people, even in the classes most anxious to repudiate the debt, were woven new strands by the abiding influence of Methodism. Chapter 12, A Nation Reborn. Captains and conquerors commonly depart this world leaving but a little dust, while kings and emperors are remembered only by a dubious legend of their reign. But the greatest seers, prophets, and spiritual leaders, by making men vitally conscious of their divine origin, and by causing the deeps within them to respond to the deeps eternal, release soul forces and create movements which abide. For transcending the ravages of time and triumphing over the dead weight of materialism, cynicism, and inertia, they incarnate the divine fire and grandeur of man's imperishable soul. They cause men to know that they are not puppets of fate, created only to be resolved to dust, but rather that they have a high destiny to achieve, and greatest of all, they open to them the springs of faith and courage, which, despite all temporary rebuffs, enable them ever to labor steadfastly for the attainment of that high destiny. So it was with Wesley. The baptizing fire of the unique revival he led overleapt all class and denominational barriers. It permeated the dry bones of old dissent, and injecting into them a pulsing life, created a new and evangelical nonconformity. Similarly, despite contumely and persecution, it revived vision and initiative among thousands within the national church, while, yet more important, reclaiming multitudes of religious outcasts who long had been beyond the pale of any spiritual influence. It transformed the tone and tenor of the national life. With that larger, interdenominational, and truly Catholic evangelicalism, this study is chiefly concerned. Next subhead is the streams or overflow. Constantly must it be remembered that harsh as was the treatment they received from the national church, that is the Church of England, the Wesleys and Whitefield were ordained clergymen of the establishment who struggled against heavy odds to keep their followers within the Anglican communion. They insisted that, save in cases of extreme necessity, their societies should never meet during hours of church worship. They urged all their members to attend church services, particularly Holy Communion, and sternly did they insist that societies should not be called a church. True, the expulsion of 6 evangelical students from Oxford in 1768, the repeated refusal by parish priests of the Lord's Supper to Methodist preachers, and the persecution of Methodists under long-dormant conventicle acts for meeting in unlicensed places, caused endless annoyance and finally forced both Wesley and the Countess of Huntingdon reluctantly to license their preaching houses under protection of a statute exempting Protestant dissenters from the penalties of the said acts. But if it is certain that the relationship of the societies to the establishment was never cordial, and equally certain that most ecclesiastical potentates continued to caricature the Methodists as mad enthusiasts, it yet is none the less certain that the impact of these societies upon the long suspicious and resentful Mother Church had, within half a century, greatly mitigated the initial prejudice of her more earnest lay members, while also it had convinced many that evangelical endeavor, with its spiritual motives, missionary fervor, and strong sense of stewardship, could alone save England from moral turpitude and social disintegration. Consequently, the influence of the movement grew steadily within the state church. Thousands of Anglicans who never dreamed of joining the Methodist societies nevertheless found in the revival a new vision of life, a new love for God and man, a new passion for Christian service. The names of such men as Fletcher, Romaine, Newton, Scott, the Venns, the Milners, Grimshaw, Berridge, Perronet, Clark, and Simeon indicate something of the hold the revival began to exercise over the clergy of the established church, even before the close of Wesley's century. While the mention of such pioneering zealots as Wilberforce, the emancipator, Zachary Macaulay, the governor of the freed slave colony at Sierra Leone, Cowper, the poet, John and Henry Thornton, the banker philanthropist, James Stephen, the famous advocate and undersecretary to the colonies, Lord Dartmouth, the colonial secretary, Lord Teignmouth, the Governor General of India, Charles Grant, chairman of the East India Company, and Hannah More, friend of the poor, and most noted literary woman of her day, affords some idea of the inspiration the movement had provided within the Anglican laity. Yet most of the prelates remained sullen or hostile, and had not these enthusiasts abode in the ship, it is doubtful if the national church could have been saved. So next time, Bready takes up the influence of the evangelical group within the establishment, which was altogether disproportionate to its numbers. I'll put in a link to a video Vivian did on what William Wilberforce, the great emancipator, called here, and C.T. Russell, the founder of the Watchtower, were doing at the age 25.